Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Computer Security Seminar, CERIAS seminar from Purdue University. Our speaker today is Bhargav-Spantzel. Sorry.
That's all right.
She came to Purdue in 1999 as a sophomore and just in the last couple of weeks has defended her PhD thesis. And she's going to share from her thesis with us today. The title is Protocols and Systems for Privacy Preserving Protection, that's probably hard to say real fast, of digital identity. Abby?
Thank you. So this is a whole lot because it covers a lot of very interesting related topics. And I'll try my best to go over most of them as carefully as I can. And please feel free to ask me questions during the presentations, if you will. Okay? So I'll be talking about, and yeah, just the last person. If at any time I start mumbling and you cannot hear me, let me know. Okay? Thanks. So I'll be talking about protocols and systems for privacy preserving protection of digital identity. So this is my main thesis research. And it has been motivated by a real-world problem of identity theft. Now, what is identity theft? So identity theft is a crime in which an imposter obtains identity information and uses it for its own personal gain. So how many people here have known identity theft? Nowadays, there's a lot of commercials and stuff. Anybody? So yeah, almost half, maybe more. So there have been increasing number of data breaches. You've seen some of the TJX cases last year. This year, only till last month, there have been 308 breaches, and a lot of people's personal information has been compromised. Now, with all this nice information in the hands of attackers, there has been a lot of liability, you have financial losses, but at the same time, you have a lot more victims of identity theft. So you can think of financial fraud and all that, but there are other very severe impact on victims with anger, fear, even having criminal records because of this type of thing. So to this extent, the main goal of my research is to provide strong verification techniques of this to avoid misuse of this identity information. So to this extent, I present some protocols, cryptographic protocols to do multi-factor verification, which is a form of strong identity verification. And then I go ahead and talk about biometric and history-based identifiers. So these identifiers are increasingly becoming an integral part of one's identity. But let's first look into some of the basic concepts of identity. Okay? So what is digital identity? So mostly in the beginning, one can think of identity as NIMs. This is how we started. We take any string. I could choose a name like Homer07 and go to a web page and chat as Homer. So those are NIMs, nothing to do with my real-world identity. But then there are identifiers such as strong identifiers like social security numbers, which uniquely identify you in the US, and weak identifiers, which can put you in a group of people. So related to digital identity, there's an aspect of ownership of identity. Now, having identity stored in all sorts of places, it is probably not very clear who is the owner of a digital identity. For example, if I go to a clinic and I get an X-ray done, it is not clear if this X-ray report is owned by myself or the clinic. So in my work, I consider the owner of a digital identity to be the individual to whom this attribute has been issued to, or the individual who is authoritative of making the claim. Okay? So identity verification then becomes the verification that the claimed attribute is actually owned by an individual and is valid. And this identity verification can occur with various types of assurance levels. And the assurance is basically the confidence about the truth of ownership of a particular identifier or validity. For example, if you go to a shop and you present your credit card, then the shopkeeper may check if you actually own the credit card and also runs it through and checks with the issuer if it is valid. So note that this identity assurance exists with or without the linkability to the real-world individual. Now, this is not very intuitive, so note this example. So if you have this first example, which has the claim that a social security number is valid and is owned by a NIM Homer07, who is the real-world individual Bob Smith. Okay? So here there is a claim which can be of strong or weak assurance, but it is very well linked with the real-world individual, Bob Smith, right? But you can also have claims of strong assurance that a particular NIM, Homer07, is a US citizen. So here I know for sure that this entity called Homer07 on the web, whom I do not know who it is in the real world, is a US citizen. So in our work, we consider the cases where we have strong assurance with or without the linkability to the real-world individual. Okay? So now we look into what are identity management systems. So this identity management systems have existed for a long, long time. They try to achieve a variety of tasks related to identity provisioning, directory services, auditing, single sign-on, access control, and so on. So governments and businesses are using these identity management systems to provide services like health, commerce, collaboration, and so on. So my aim over here was to show the complexity of these identity management systems. These are big systems. So I went on to the web and I was trying to retrieve a bunch of examples. I saw more than 200 companies with one or more products. So over here I just provide some of the initiatives. The number of standards also provide some kind of evidence that these systems are growing or of growing importance. So you have standards such as Liberty Alliance and W3C and so on, which provide some kind of standards to how this message exchange happens in identity management systems. Okay? So given that these identity management systems are big, complex systems, and they have a lot of other issues with relating to laws, business requirements, and so on, my research focuses more on the research challenges related to misuse prevention of identity in such systems. Okay? And we take a holistic approach in that we look at the whole life cycle of an identity and see what can go wrong in each step and how to protect against misuse. So the very first step is the issuance of identity. And it goes back to a discussion that Ian and I, we were discussing this morning, that one could potentially have a valid passport, but if it was issued to a wrong person, regardless of the fact that this passport cannot be forged or it cannot be duplicated and whatnot, it has just been issued to the wrong person. So if the issuance is wrong, then the rest of the system can not rely upon such an identifier. So the issuance is one of the most important things that we look at. And then it comes on to having various types of flexible types of enrollments that we need and calculate the assurance levels associated with that. So online enrollment versus in-person enrollment and so on. The next step is actual usage of identity. So at this point, it is most important to prevent against misuse. So related to that is the multi-factor validation. So whenever a person is trying to use an identifier, he is able to provide other proofs of identity. At the time of providing the strong verification, it is important to make sure that you're not disclosing more information than needed. So here I want strong assurance that this person is who he says he is, but at the same time we want to ensure the privacy of that individual, in that he is not required to provide more information than that is needed for the service. So minimal disclosure is one of the important aspects. Then is the use of biometric data and history-based data, which I just mentioned, being an integral part of one's identity. So you can think of it as what you have is a part of your identity, who you are is another, and also what you do also becomes a part of your identity, which is the history-based data. Okay? And the next step is also the modification of identity. So I enrolled it securely, I'm using it all right, but then the modification has to also make sure that there is no malicious entity trying to tamper with it. And finally, the revocation, where we need flexible and efficient types of revocations to be able to manage such identifiers. So the key problem that we are looking at is the misuse of identity attribute. So this happens when an adversary who does not own an identity attribute successfully uses it. So we do have a lot of solutions like phishing prevention techniques and so on, which look at parts of the identity usage. But at the same time, it does not look at the whole life cycle of how this identity gets used. So it's as secure as the weakest one, right? And most of the identity management systems do not consider various types of identifiers